Friends, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. This session is how wanting more keeps you empty. These are lessons learned from understanding these concepts of need and greed. But I tell you this, we cannot speak about need and greed without understanding the concept of ambition first. And that is because ambition and greed, they are completely different monsters. For some reason, we have been seeing that they can be substituted when speaking of one and the other, and this is incorrect. Ambition is an inferior characteristic driven by the ego that is attributed to the personality. Because ambition is that of a person that wants to do or wants to have something very much large or excessive in terms of high respect and admiration. Everything that is done by ambition is done with a purpose of achieving high respect and admiration. That is the sole purpose. And there are many ways in which this thing, ambition, exists. It lurks in the shadows. You can barely detect it there, and it expresses itself in the most subtle of ways. I mean, there are penitents in all of the holy religions who flagellate and torture themselves to experience a miracle. Sometimes penitents are healthy and they're devout people, but they covet a miracle and they do penance, moved by the incentive of ambition. They are willing to damage their physical body, torture it in such a way that the physical body suffers and bleeds. With what purpose? Ambition. And that is high respect and admiration. There are many saints that they have only one ambition, and that is the ambition of not being ambitious. So even amongst the saints, and this is not us telling you, this is what we have learned from the great masters. Saints that are seeking to not be ambitious, and they are moved by a desire of high respect or admiration. Even some people, they claim that they would dislike money and they will reject it. They would want nothing to do with worldly possessions, with things of this world, and they would give everything away. But in secret, what they are coveting is eternal happiness. The ambition that they have is to be able to experience that admiration, that respect, of achieving those higher states of consciousness. But of course, we're not saints. And maybe, well, we don't fall into this category of those who are willing to just reject everything that is of the world. But as we turn into this new circumstance in which we live, where minimalism is such an intelligent thing to do, where living within your means is more and more a really good idea, well, our ambitions have shifted somewhere else. And now the ambitions in seeking that high respect and admiration have to do with how many subscriptions you get, how many likes, how many shares you're experiencing across your social media platforms. And we can say some people do the unmentionable to be able to achieve these. They even put themselves at risk. And it is true that we see these defects, and sometimes we would like just to pull on the emergency brake, stop this cold turkey, and see these things disappear. But lamentably, things do not work that way. If we suppress the defects that we know we have today, they're just going to continue operating in different levels of the mind, and they will be then negatively fortified. If we take these defects and we don't observe them, we don't comprehend them, we don't eliminate them, if we suppress them and we shove them into deeper sections of our subconscious, when the right circumstances are present, when the right causes and conditions manifest, these defects are going to come back with a vengeance, and their consequences are going to be so much worse. So we know this, whether consciously or subconsciously, and we just have a good feel by experience that things happen this way. Well, sometimes we just feel ourselves low. We feel ourselves down, like we need some extra help. And to do that, we then seek for something outside of us that can help us get rid of these things. This is known by all of the great masters. Actually, Samael, in his writings in the book, The Social Transformation of Humanity, he says, certain schools teach positive systems that fortify the sense of self. Those inferior aspects of pride self-love, self-consideration, self-admiration, etc. Well, we all have them, and we have them in different levels of manifestation. And some people, well, those aspects are very aggressive, and they seek for this extra help outside of themselves. And these positive systems that fortify the sense of self, they always end up creating more problems. Let me tell you this, there are aspects of the ego that they will presume to be saints, and they will even want to go out and do charitable work. There are aspects of our psychological aggregates that are willing to give away everything that they have. Their inheritance, goods, they're willing to give everything, but it's always in exchange of something. Even when you're experiencing that ambition to pick up yourself on bad days and start using all of these false affirmations, positive systems that fortify the sense of self, create a problem. Because you may want to pick up yourself on bad days, but for what purpose? Because there's an ambition to be happy? Because you want to be happy in such a way that, what is this? No. This ambition is very dangerous. We must acknowledge that it exists within each and every one of us, and we must strive to get rid of it. As a matter of fact, Samael says ambition is very paradoxical. If we repress it, it gets stronger. If we don't repress it, it gets stronger as well. So we only have one option. We have to go deep into that well that is ambition, observe it, comprehend it, and we must always invoke a power superior to the mind to help us eliminate it. But we must understand the consequences of our ambition. We must make ourselves sincere with our own selves so that we can see the consequence that these things are creating. Because once we understand what that is, once we have that deep understanding, that understanding by itself brings a radical change to us, a radical change to the mind, and it will extinguish forever what is known as the will-o'-wisp of ambition. Let's observe and comprehend. If you need some help to observe and understand what is it that you're observing, allow us to tell you this. Fear is the cause of ambition. Some people may be fearful of not having enough money. Some people may be fearful of being forgotten. They move away, their friends are never going to remember them. That they die and people may never remember them again. Some people have the fear of letting others down. Some others have the fear of not having an impact on the world. Their struggle, I don't know what my mission is, I don't know what my purpose is. So they have that fear of living a life without knowing what that is. There are many fears. Behind each and every one of those fears, there is an ambition. So we must dive deep into that well of the ambition. See it, observe it, comprehend it, invoke of that power of Kundalini so that we can see it eliminated. Seek to understand the consequences of it, because I tell you, this is what we have learned to experience. This is what the masters have taught. The comprehension of that is enough to crack that ambition and for those things to not manifest. But there are some other extreme cases. Some people are extreme. And in terms of ambition, in terms of all these fears, we know of a practitioner who abandoned his family. And before he abandoned his family, he told his wife, I am seeking a spiritual path at whatever the cost, and I'm leaving. They renounced their families. They abandoned their friends. They abandoned their children. And even though they justified it in this way, they were completely unaware of the negative consequences of these particular actions. Our friend, the guy in this story, he invited negative reactions of all kinds, in all kinds of people, in his family, in his friends, at work, judgments from others, everyone's opinion. Everybody suddenly became an expert in family matters. And that brought about sufferings for his children, for his ex-wife, for his friends, for his immediate family. The sense of abandonment was overwhelming. So no. I mean, ambition is a dangerous thing, and we share this example because the words of the masters must resonate with us. Many people renounce all the pomp and vanity of the world because they only ambition their intimate self-perfection. No. Self-realization cannot be at the expense of others. It must only be at the expense of oneself, and that is where the concept of self-sacrifice emerges. So I hope that with this, you can have a better understanding on the consequences of ambition, on how sly this defect is, because now you have a better understanding on how to look to comprehend it. Remember, behind every fear, there is a root of ambition. So understanding that, knowing that ambition is more of an inferior trait that is expressed by the personality. Okay, it's rooted in the ego, but an inferior trait that is rooted in the personality. Let's talk a little bit about greed. And there's nothing better for us to talk about greed than to relate it to money, because this is very easy to see. But as we were reflecting on the material for tonight, we also understand that we live in a different time. I mean, we can talk about money all we want, but the fact is that most people today, they cannot make enough to live the way that they want. And it is not because they are irresponsible or because of whatever. It is because this is the current environment that we're living. There are many people out there who spend up more than they make. And it is not that they are being frivolous in their spending. It is simply because of the high cost of living. I mean, many of you who are listening to this, I am completely sure you're suffering the strain of student loan debt. Maybe you have been part of this difficult labor market. Maybe you're working on a job for which you are tremendously overqualified. Maybe you're suffering in a job for which you got and you are not adequately qualified to fulfill the job. You see, all of these things are because of the current environment in which we're living. And as an emerging generation, one thing that we've seen is that this new generation that's rising is redefining the concept of wealth. I think that that is phenomenal. And they have redefined the concept of wealth in 3 specific factors: money, purpose, and well-being. So if we can say money and the meaning in life and their well-being, those 3 things are part of the equation that define wealth. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at this. In terms of one's role and one's purpose, the masters tell us in practical life, each human being is useful for something. And the important thing is to know what each one is useful for. We must know what is that thing for which we are here. And friends, I want you to know that that is called a vocation. In the early 15th century, this word vocation had a very specific meaning. It was spiritual calling. But I don't want you to think that because it is a spiritual calling, that it is something that has to do with mystical practices and devotional practices. It is a spiritual calling because this is the calling of your innermost. This is the way that your innermost seeks to move and work your consciousness while you're here in this dense realm of substance so that you can contribute in a way that is harmonious and beneficial for everyone else. This thing, vocation, if we're going to speak of it in the most simplest of terms, this is one's occupation or profession. This is where you would thrive the most if you were to do this in life. This would be, for example, your ideal job, whether you realize it or not. And the thing about vocation is that because it is a spiritual calling, because it is moved from the depths of your heart by the fire of your innermost, it only seeks to offer service and sacrifice for humanity only fueled by the power of love. There cannot be anything better than that. Every work every job, regardless of what the job is, whether it is a shoe shiner, a butcher, a mailman, whether it is a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, a teacher, it does not matter. There is a vocation associated with every one of those fields. Now, the problem is when you have a vocation and you decide to take a different path, moved by ambitions, because you're seeking that high respect and admiration. We know of really good doctors that they would better be off being mechanics, because that's where their vocation is. They're not bad doctors, but they're not exceptional doctors either. They would be better off being mechanics because that is their vocation. We know of engineers who are pretty good engineers, but their vocation is being a teacher. And that is where they thrive. But they decided to go down the other way. So what happens? When we do not listen to our vocation, then we get caught in ambitions. And being caught in ambitions, there's a lot of suffering that comes with it. We're not saying abandon your job and go do your vocation. That is a decision for you to make. But you can also keep the job that you have, and you can look for an opportunity to go and practice your vocation. Because when you do that, that humble work that is moved, fueled by the fire of love, it brings about harmony, equanimity. It makes things better for everyone. And there is a tremendous degree of happiness that comes with that. So in terms of what is your purpose, what is your mission? While you're here, part of your mission is finding your vocation and exercising it. And that brings about a tremendous degree of happiness in your life. But part of your mission is, as a consciousness, to satisfy the parlok duty of the being. This is perhaps a new word. Maybe you had not heard this before. The parlok duty of the being is the cosmic duty of your being, of your spirit. And that duty is, because your innermost exists in the higher realms of creation, up there in the sixth dimension of nature. I mean, so many realms above where we stand today. Well, the only thing that we have incarnated from our innermost is the consciousness. Through working here, sacrificing here, being in connection with the innermost lives this experience. And here we have the ability to work with forces and substances that empower the innermost to exist in these realms of creation as well. So this parlok duty of the being, this is the duty of becoming conscious of all of the activities of the 5 centers of the human machine. That means you receive an impression. You can perceive from which center it's coming in. It's coming through the eyes, through the ears, the nose, the taste. Is it touch? Is it all at the same time? You will be able to perceive that. And not only that, you will be able to transform that. You become capable of refraining the reactions of the mind and the sentiment before those impressions. And as you do that, you save of that creative power that exists within you. You save of those marvelous creative waters that can be used to be transformed and fabricate superior bodies. Imagine yourself fabricating a solar astral body so that you become a permanent resident of the astral plane. Imagine yourself beyond that, fabricating a solar mental body so you can become a permanent resident of that mental realm of creation that exists in the higher space of the 5th dimension. Imagine yourself beyond that, having the ability to fabricate a causal body so that you can become a permanent resident of the causal plane. That is, those of you who know of the tree of life, in the sphere of Tiferet. Getting to the level of a causal man empowers the practitioner to receive the Gnostic initiation, and that is what results in the Son of Man. Those are adepts. Those are great masters. This is part of that parlok duty of the being. This is the duty of forging those superior existential bodies. But you and I have a challenge. Perhaps a challenge and a good difficulty. Because in the past, in long-lost humanities, think of the times of Atlantis or Lemuria, all of those beings were governed by a principle of nature called the Fulanistanian principle. And that principle gave all those humans the ability to live a tremendously long span of time so that they could fabricate these bodies, so they could eliminate any psychological aggregates they had created, so that they could transcend from the human condition here on earth into the human condition that exists in the higher realms up there as an angel, an archangel, a throne, etc. The full Einsteinian principle allowed those beings to live centuries. In the times of Lemuria, 1200, 1500 years. That is a long time. In the times of Atlantis, 700, 800, 900 years. That is a long time. But because we have allowed ourselves to be consumed with the psychological aggregates, because we have so many fears and so many ambitions, and we are constantly making so many silly mistakes, this downward spiral of degeneration that we see today in the common humanoid, well, the full Einsteinian principle no longer applies. And instead, we're governed by the Itoklanos principle. And that principle is the one that governs the lives of the animals. And what is characteristic about the Itoklanos principle is that you never know when you're going to die. So it could happen soon. It could happen in 50 years. You don't know. Nobody knows. But that is the Itoklanos principle. And the difficulty, the challenge that this brings to us is that we must start placing the right value behind this internal work. Because if we don't know when this body's going to be asked to stop working, when this consciousness is going to be asked to leave these bodies, then we have to take advantage of every opportunity that we are given. And so we tell you, find your vocation. Look for that thing that you know that you are really good at. Look around and see where is it that humanity can benefit from that contribution of yours, and go do it. Because then you bring harmony. Then that sacrifice of yours, it brings happiness. It brings equanimity. Okay, but enough about this thing on the purpose. Enough about this thing on what is it that I have to do. Let's go ahead and start transitioning into the topic of, to the combined topics of well-being and money, because vocation has a lot to do with well-being too. Samael says in his book, The Introduction to Gnosis, all human beings need bread, clothing, and shelter. This is known. Bread, clothing, and shelter. That's the list of our basic needs. Actually, he continues by saying, why is it that this, so natural and simple, even for the birds in the sky, has assumed such a tremendous importance and frightening significance? That is, friends, because if we're going to speak about money and well-being, we have to acknowledge that we have placed in money an inordinate value. We have exaggerated the importance of money to the point that we have created a psychological dependency. Exaggerated the value of money, created a psychological dependency, and worst of all, we have started using money for psychological purposes. The crazy thing about this is that we have used money for psychological purposes, whether we have the money or not. Because many people don't have the money and they make pretend that they have it, and they live in a tremendous amount of debt just for the sake of satisfying their psychological dependency. This money has come to feed our vanity. We have used it to try to cement ourselves somewhere in the scale of social prestige. I mean, we're using it as a means to be powerful. We see this all the time in the news, how these people with their ridiculous amounts of money, they use it to force things to go into their direction. So collectively, we have given money more value than what money actually deserves. And the problem is that when we use money as a reflection of our well-being, it becomes very evident. And it makes us very miserable. I mean, we start walking around and all we do is show off logos and brands. I mean, we flash them in our purses, embroider in our shirts, we tattoo them in our skin. We start following all of these trends for the sake of defining ourselves based on these external things that are irrelevant. They're trivial in nature. I mean, some people, they don't even have $1 in savings. But what is important to them is to sound rich. And part of sounding rich is name dropping of people they know. And if they don't know, if they are like actors or influencers or whoever it is, just to speak a lot of them and make pretend that they know a lot about them, just to show like they're adequately connected to those very wealthy whatever. No. And as part of these cycles, trying to outdo each other, then we start seeing so much oversharing of personal aspects of their life in social media. They're always trying to keep up. There is no way possible that this can return a good sense of well-being. No way. There is an inordinate value that has been placed on this thing, money and riches. As a matter of fact, in the book Introduction to Gnosis, Samael says, when we deeply understand that money is only meant to provide us with bread, clothing, and shelter, we spontaneously put an intelligent limitation on it. Read that again. Spontaneously put an intelligent limitation on it. There is an intervention of the consciousness where it acknowledges the condition and immediately severs, it detaches from that psychological dependency. But to do this, we must, number one, become very sincere with ourselves. And number two, we must understand that money by itself, it's neither good nor bad. It all depends on the use that we make of it. We cannot see money as, it has been said so many times that I'm sure everybody believes it. Money is the root of all evil. That is not true. Money is neither good nor bad. It all depends on the use that we make of it. When we understand our relationship with money, then the pain of detachment ends. Then it is no longer important if you have an iPhone 9000 Series 3 or if what you have is still an iPhone 4. It does not matter. It does not matter if you are dressed with the really fancy clothes or if you are just dressed with clothes that you know that are comfortable and that you can afford and be happy with. All the terrible suffering that competition produces in us, it will go away. But we must learn to differentiate between our immediate physical needs and our psychological dependence on things. Let me expand a little bit on this thing called psychological dependence, because there is a combination of factors here. This psychological dependence is not just a thing of the mind. There is a combination of things here that we must understand. The obstacle is that in that equation of ambition and sensations, that will never bring about satisfaction. Ambition plus the effect of sensations, it does not bring satisfaction. It does not bring happiness. We already understand the problem with ambition, and you are now in a good position to start looking into it and eliminate it. But what happens with sensations? Sensations are connected to satisfaction. And there is a cascade effect of sensation and satisfaction that we have also started abusing. In terms of sensations, again, anything that comes through the senses, the eyes, the nose, the ears, the taste, or the sensation of touch. The experience of sensations brings about an excitement. Now, I want you to know, the brain does not know the difference between what is inside and what is outside. As a consequence, these sensations, they can be directly to the physical senses, or they can be a mental stimulation that is ultimately expressed through the sensations of the body. Understand that, because when it comes to sensations, at first there is an excitement. That excitement, it builds anticipation. And in that anticipation, we tend to forget of ourselves. And focusing only on satisfying the sensations of the body, we put an exaggerated focus on the experience of the sensations. This is particularly true when the sensations are of a sexual nature. Excitement, anticipation, and the ridiculously exaggerated focus on the experience of the sensation itself. All of this brings into the body a tremendous amount of tension. And that tension is not free. That tension demands energy. And the only source of energy that we have in our body is that of our sexual creative waters. Those waters are the mercury that the alchemists used to speak of. Remember when the alchemists were working on transforming lead into gold? Yeah. And they were looking for that philosopher's stone, and they were looking for the elixir of long life. Well, much of that has to do with our sexual creative waters and the transmutation of that lead into gold. They were speaking about transmuting the lead of the personality into the gold of the spirit. There's a lot of teaching there. But in this tension, we are ridiculously consuming our creative power. We are misusing the power of our creative water, sending it down channels that it should not go. And then, in that tension, we come to the experience of the sensations and the rush of pleasures that flow through the body. It reaches a peak, and then there is that discharge. And immediately after that, there is an emptiness. And the question that then comes to mind is, why did I do that? If not, what's next? I did this. So what? What's next? And if not, that was not as good as I thought it was going to be. Ugh. And with that emptiness, if that emptiness remains unchecked, it takes you into a deeper space, into a darker space of shame and guilt. And then self-worth gets affected. And when that self-worth gets affected, there's an ambition then to be admired and loved, and then it feeds back into the ambition. This is a never-ending cycle. This is a downward spiral that is very difficult to get out of. But we tell you this: an antidote exists. And to take that antidote, we must be able to embrace virtue. We must learn to be content. We must learn and expect to do things anticipating nothing in return. I mean, if you do something for someone and they don't even say thank you, you should be just as happy. Because if you're angry because they did not even say thank you, then you did not do the thing for them. You did it for yourself. Expect nothing in return. Make an effort to maintain that remembrance of self. Keep in mind that not only we're here with a purpose to exercise that vocation, but also to exercise the parlock duty of the being. And instead of consuming yourself in all that tension, learn to be relaxed. Because if you can remain relaxed even at the most difficult times on your existence, you will be able to effectively listen, and you will perceive the voice of your innermost. Wow. All of these things start resulting in gratitude for every moment. And before you realize, you're living in a space of harmony and balance and equanimity. And when all things are in harmony, happiness flows uninterrupted. Let me share with you something that Samael says. He says, the psychological self, perceiving its own emptiness and misery, usually gives all things a different value than their worth. If we remain stuck in this downward spiral of never-ending cycles of seeking to satisfy sensations, of sticking with our greed, of trying to make pretend of things that we are not, etc., we're going to continue giving things, all things, an exaggerated value, more important than what the thing is. And the ego, being by nature poor and miserable, is going to try to continue enriching itself externally. For as long as that defect is there, what is going to happen is that we're going to continue justifying our greed. I mean, I was surprised. I was surprised as I was just browsing TikTok just to see how much people actually spend in shoes. And why? I mean, thousands of dollars for a pair of shoes? Wow. I am so happy to see that there are so many influencers out there trying to just shake people so that they can consciously awaken and realize, please don't do that. No, no, no. The only thing that moves us to do such inordinate things are our fears, our ambitions, our ego. The ego will always move us into a space of justifying our greed. And so, we must seek to eliminate that. But I tell you this, as we see other people exercising their greed, it's very easy for us to judge them. It's very easy for us to say they shouldn't do that, they should know better. Yeah. But that is very unfair. The one thing that we must truly realize is that the greed of other individuals exists within you and me. All of this collective greed that we see across our nation, it also exists inside of you as much as it exists inside of me. So actually, this is the teaching from the great masters. All individuals live within our own consciousness. The greed of the world is found within the individual. So when we see the greed in others, rather than us thinking that we are better, let's realize that that greed exists in us. And it may not express itself in the way that you're seeing it, but you have to look at how is it that greed plays in your mind. You have to see how that greed plays in your emotion. And how is it that you materialize it? Because when we acknowledge that, it humbles you and it empowers your consciousness to be able to perceive, comprehend, and invoke of that igneous serpent of magical powers that exists in all of us, and that is the fire of Devi Kundalini. When we observe and we comprehend the defect, we can invoke of our Divine Mother so that she can eliminate it for us, because our mind has no power over these defects. It will only move them around and justify them and make things worse. And that doesn't work. Life is telling us that it doesn't work. We can see it. So we invoke of this superior power, and we as Divine Mother take this defect and we beg you with our soul, with our heart, reduce it to a cosmic dust, and she will. And she will. So do this. So I have for you a practice that you can start right now, tonight. When you're going to lay down tonight, lay down in the star, in the shape of a 5-pointed star. If it is possible, lie down in a comfortable place where your head can be pointed towards the north, and focus on your immediate physical needs. The practice is meditate and reflect on your needs. If you are not sure how to meditate, if you're not sure how to reflect, that's okay. Invoke of your innermost. Invoke of your being. Ask of your divine being, Divine Father, I am here humbly before you, asking for your help. And ask your being, show me in a way that only you can, what are my immediate physical needs. You can ask your being, show it in such a way that it is crystal clear that this message is coming from you. You can ask your being, be so insistent showing me that there is no other option than for me to realize that you are showing me. When you ask like that, you will receive. And what happens? Lay down comfortably. Relax your body. Ask of the help of your innermost and embrace the principle of spontaneity. That means that spontaneously an image is going to show in the screen of your mind. When you see it, don't reject it. Don't judge it. Don't say it's not that. Receive it, observe it, comprehend it. Nobody's going to judge you for this. This is a very personal, internal, private exercise. This is why it's called esoteric work. See it. And allow yourself to fall asleep. But fall asleep trying to discover where your need ends and your greed begins. Friends, we can tell you that in internal vision, you're going to discover your greed. And once you discover that greed, invoke of your Divine Mother and ask her to help you eliminate it. And be insistent consistent about that. Samael says dedicate 2 months to a defect. Some people say 2 months is too much. But if you look back on how many months you have lived since you have become an adult, if you had been doing this diligently every day, you can see how many defects you would have eliminated by now. Most likely, you'd be able to be walking on water. So here you go. This is a good practice for you tonight. Now, there's also a prayer that we would like to share with you. It is called the Beliling prayer, or the prayer of Beliling. This is a prayer that the angel Aroch gave Master Samael. And this prayer helps keep at bay the influence of tenebrous entities, of dark forces, of anything that can use materialism as an influence over you. Because we tell you this, many dark practitioners, they characterize themselves because they tend to create psychic obsessions with things. And so materialism is one of those things that they can use. And this prayer is beautiful. When you recite this prayer, you would be better off singing it. And it sounds something like this. Beliling, 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 Emperor of salvation, I'd like to be next to thee. Materialism has no power over me. Beliling, Beliling, Beliling. And keep repeating that prayer. Give yourself an opportunity. And in this simple prayer, give yourself the chance of experiencing its profound power. We always speak about the elimination of these defects, and we do so with a purpose. The self, the ego, is fortified with both positive or negative procedures. Affirmations strengthen our ego. Negative experiences, when we don't transform them, they harden and fortify the ego as well. If we make mistakes and we know that we commit them and continue to commit them, it is clear that the self will continue to be fortified. And if we knowingly continue making mistakes, that fortification of the defect will be a positive one. We're no longer like the original Adam and Eve, you know? Ever since we were expelled from paradise, things have gotten a little bit more complicated. And now we have the opportunity to empower the consciousness to eliminate these defects and empower the consciousness so that our spirit can exercise its parlock duty. Friends, we wanted to share this with you tonight, and if you are more interested in this, not only you can subscribe to our channel and enjoy the many hundreds of lectures that we have available for you, but you can also look into the books of Master Samael Aun Weor. The material for tonight, we find it in The Social Transformation of Humanity, in the book titled The Fundamentals of Gnostic Education, in the book The Introduction to Gnosis, and in the transcript of a lecture that he shared with his advanced students titled The Practice of White Tantra. Dear friends, this is what we wanted to share with you tonight, how wanting more keeps you empty. Lessons learned from understanding need and greed. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. May your beings be happy.